welcome to the Landscapes of Art and Earth. I'm your host, Shivani Gupta, and in this show, we will be having conversations with artists and environmentalists who can inform and connect us to some of the most important topics in our world today. Today, we're joined by the incredibly talented designer, artist, and writer Zoe Detweiler. Zoe recently earned a graduate degree in landscape architecture and urbanism from the University of Southern California, where she is also completing a second master's in heritage conservation, set to finish this December. She previously studied journalism and art history at Northwestern University. Raised in Culver City in Malibu, Zoe's personal experiences, including the 2018 Woolsey fire, have deeply informed her relationship with land and the built environment. Her work spans disciplines, from designing projects to heal eroding coastlines and reconnect people to the ocean, to exploring intuition-led weaving through the Japanese practice of SAORI. Zoe brings a blend of intellectual rigor, creativity, and deep care for place, and I'm truly honored to welcome her to the show today. Zoe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Shivani. That was so kind of you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'd love to start by asking, how did your upbringing in Southern California kind of influence your art and career path? And what kind of ecosystems, whether natural ecosystems or other kinds of ecosystems, were you introduced to?
So I think first, for the first half of my childhood, I was raised in Culver City, which is a city apart from Los Angeles, but generally just in the LA area. And it's a very diverse and very urban city with some nature nearby, but not it's not particularly notable in its built environment in any way. And then when I was a little bit older, we moved to Malibu, which is much more of a rural community. It's sort of the last city in North LA County. On that side, it's very small, it's very rural, it's much less diverse in its demographics, but the nature that's around is incredibly beautiful, from the beaches to the coastal sage scrub in the Santa Monica Mountains. And so I think seeing that, growing up within that environment really informed, this is sort of the best version of what nature in Southern California can be. It's we would see, everything bloom in the spring, and it would just be covered in beautiful green and different colors of flowers. And then eventually I moved back to LA, back to Culver City actually, and I think I really missed having access to that nature. And I could see only some communities are, or different communities are given different access to nature within the city. And it encouraged me to want to seek out more of it and also give that to other people as well, promote equitable access throughout the county.
That's amazing. And I completely agree. I've only been to Malibu maybe once or twice, but it's truly a paradise when you go. So you're currently living in Los Angeles and studying at USC. Is there something in addition to your graduate studies that in particular that brought you back to the Southern California landscape?
I think so, yeah. I went away to college to the Chicago area, and there I loved also being right on Lake Michigan, which is really amazing. But I will say the winters did not agree with me in quite the same way. I graduated in the pandemic, so after college there weren't a ton of job opportunities, or just there's a lot of uncertainty in the world generally. And so I just knew I wanted to move back home, one, to get away from the winter, and also just to kind of to figure out what was next. And then I think a lot of people kind of say this, once you are back in Los Angeles, it's kind of hard to leave, especially I think knowing what else was out there in terms of weather-wise. I did not feel inclined to go search out opportunities in other places. And I think also being close to my family was, very important to me, and they're here, so I enjoyed that.
That makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely attest to the weather and family aspect. I grew up in California, and I've never lived outside of California, but when it's 55 degrees outside, I'm wearing 3 layers, so...
Yeah, so I learned how that's not real winter, but yeah, now I know that's sometimes can be really cold too.
Yes. into your artistic process, what does your research process look like? And given that you studied journalism and art history, did those subjects and practices inform your current research process today?
Yeah, good question. I think, so for landscape projects as well as heritage conservation projects, the approach I take to both is sort of rooted in like what is currently on the site of whatever the project may be, and therefore like the history of what has happened there. Because, as a designer, you're never working on a blank slate, ever. Even if it's an empty lot, like there was something once on that empty lot, there's things going on all around it. There are neighbors, whether they be birds and plants or humans. There are neighbors of all kinds. And so I think my design process always begins with, what was once there and what has happened, because that informs everything from the state of the soil to what needs people have in the area. So and I think maybe studying journalism and art history also, in journalism you're taught to like what's the deeper story, like what's the most interesting and what actually is like true about what you're working on, like what facts will reveal things that maybe people hadn't thought about. So maybe that I'm using that kind of mindset when I go into these things. And I think learning about art history, one is like, I think it gave me a appreciation for things that are beautiful and meaningful in as good art is. And so I think, while all of these other things are important, it's also important to create something beautiful and that means something and illustrates things. Yeah.
Wow, that makes sense. And I think the idea of something being beautiful, from my experience, it often has like a bad reputation of like, oh, it's surface level, but there's so much that beauty does for the world, and without beauty the world would not be the same. And so your research process sounds like it's very holistic. It thinks about the people, as you've mentioned, the people, the place, and you really think about it like in a very comprehensive way. So I'd love to ask you about, could you tell us a little bit about one of your projects called Engine of Change, how it works, where the sand comes from?
So that project was for a site design studio in one of my classes last year in my landscape architecture project, my landscape architecture program. And we were tasked with working on a naval base in Ventura County, and that was facing challenges related to sea level rise, which then contributes to erosion, or storms. Also, storm surges now cause like larger waves, which again contribute to erosion and therefore sea level rise and damagement of assets on the naval base. And I think I was really struggling with the project because I felt like it was hypocritical to not acknowledge that the United States military are theoretical client in the project is one of the world's largest polluters, and carbon emissions are what are contributing to sea level rise. So I was really struggling with kind of how to balance all of these things on site and in my project. And I think my professor told me like, well, why don't you focus on just like things that you like? I was kind of trying to be cutting and show things, and he said, but really like design is about like love and doing something that you enjoy. And so I took that to heart, and I turned to thinking about what I love about that area, which was in Ventura, which is close to where I grew up. And so I thought about going to the beach and playing on the beach and things like that. And so I designed a system where the idea was that the community, which included people who live on the base, as well as the local agricultural community, which is huge in Ventura, and just other workers around, as well as surfers, because there's like a legendary surf spot off the coast, the coast there, could come together and participate in building basically sand fences, which are when you've probably seen them on beaches before. It's like the little wood fences put along to help like make dunes and to help prevent sand erosion. But so I thought, how can we make these more fun and participatory? And so I designed them as sort of like a play system, where you could build like almost giant house of cards with them. So, yeah.
It's amazing. And so your project is very multifaceted in the sense that is it called a sand motor?
Yes. So yes, this also included the concept of a sand motor, which is a technology that is from the Netherlands. Yeah, that's from the Netherlands, where they dredge sand up off of the bottom of the ocean and put it onto the shore. And but all instead of, which they do sometimes, but usually it's dispersed, but instead here basically they put it all in one pile, and the sand like distributes itself more naturally, and it helps sort of renew the sand on site. So I'd paired my project with the sand fences along with this in order to help augment the beaches that are being eroded every day.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so the fences, I was reading in your portfolio, they can be used in many different ways. They can be used as stands for surfboards. They're used for the building the sand dunes. So it's very innovative what you've come up with, and I'm so excited to, keep in the loop about this project. And
Thank you.
So I also want to ask about one of your projects was the Culver City Parks Plan. Could you tell us a little bit more about this one as well?
Yeah, so I worked on that while I was an intern for a landscape architecture firm who were contracted with the city to work on the parks plan. And that was really exciting because, as I said, I lived in Culver City when I was a kid and live there now still. So I got sort of a behind-the-scenes look at how creating a long-term 50-year plan for the future of a city's parks can really happen. And all the community engagement that goes into that, asking residents, what do you want in your parks? What do you need? Looking at the sort of regional system as a whole and saying what are some major things that are lacking here, or things that need improvements more than, maybe this needs to be improved first and then we can look at, a secondary thing. So that was really fun. And we did community engagement with kids who were at, camps at parks that I had been at as a kid as well. So that was sort of a nice full circle moment. And now the plan is being enacted by the city, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
That is so exciting, and that is such a special project to work on too. And I feel like kind of going back to how one of your professors mentioned to you for the Engine of Change project, do what you love. I feel like when you have some kind of a personal connection to a project, or you really are passionate about it, your best work comes out of it, or it's like the most meaningful to you, and then you put out the best of yourself.
Yeah, which I think the idea is you can, find something that you love in every project, even if it's not necessarily something you maybe agree with or you expected to do, that there's always something to be excited about. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to touch upon was one of the discoveries that you've kind of had in your kind of career in landscape architecture, which is the sustainability of this process. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you've kind of learned about the sustainability of this field in terms of how environmentally sustainable it is?
So something that landscape architects don't actually like talking about very much is that many landscape architecture projects are not very sustainable. I mean, building anything, pouring concrete, that uses tons of carbon emissions. And so I think it's something that we in the field need to be more aware of, or at least talk about more and be sort of more honest with ourselves. And then obviously also constantly thinking about, what would make this more carbon neutral? Is it, using more recycled materials or locally sourced materials instead of just the cheapest ones? Obviously creating systems for making these kinds of things, more efficient, both, in energy as well as cost. Yeah, but I think something else I learned in one of a project that I did is like also though, you know, you can offset things if you restore a river that you know, will like far and away absorb more carbon than you emit when you do the construction to restore it. So, you know, there's always things to think about.
That makes sense. So is it kind of like you're doing a landscape architecture project and then you can kind of positively contribute to the environment in another way?
Yeah, and I think always, like, landscape architects should always be thinking about how to maximize the benefits that we can provide. You know, if we're pouring concrete, how can we also maybe create a wetland on the site, or provide bird habitat, or like something like that, or clean the air around for the neighbors, things like that. Yeah.
Wow. And that's something that you're personally thinking about as well, right? In the way that you design your projects. And I remember one thing that you're personally passionate about is the relationship between designers and the community as well. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of goes back to my journalism training, where I often saw sort of the ways that those bonds were not supported. When, you know, there's a lot of, I think it's called like helicopter journalism, like the idea that you just like drop down, get your story, and then leave. That happens often with landscape architecture or architecture projects as well. And so I think as I move forward in my career, I'm very interested in how actual genuine bonds can be formed about what, you know, what people want and need, and how it can, maintenance is a big element of this. You know, if you drop a beautiful park in a underserved community and then don't give them any money to, you know, maintain it, clean it, keep it well lit, if that's what they want, like, then obviously you're not fully supporting the design the design process doesn't end when the project is built. It continues into maintaining and you know, changing things as are needed.
That makes sense. So you're essentially creating something that's like its own life. Like it's something that needs to be, as you said, maintained and carried on. And you can't. It's like thinking about it more responsibly. Like you can't just create something in the world and just forget about it and do it for self-serving purposes and just to like be like, oh, I did this, now I can move on. It's like, no, you're impacting people's lives, and you want to really think about how it can positively impact them, and it's a mutual relationship. And then I'd love to talk about, so we touched on your research process. Does your artistic process kind of overlap with your research process? What does that look like?
That's a good question. I think my primary artistic medium right now is weaving, which I've been doing for just a few years. And I do this kind of freeform weaving that was invented in Japan by a woman named Misao Jo, called SAORI weaving. That's supposed to be very like intuitive and just sort of, let's say, what's the word? Yeah, I will just say that's intuitive and lets you freely express yourself. And so in some ways, I guess it's not exactly like my research project in that, yeah, not a lot of research goes into it. I think I'm more attracted to kind of just like colors, shapes, textures, and creating things with those, which I guess the idea of like making something beautiful goes there, but it's definitely less involved in some ways. I would love to expand my practice. I think I've been a little bit busy with school for the past 3 years, so I haven't developed it as much as I would quite have liked to. But yeah, though it does, I use, I try to like reuse, I try to recycle materials as much as I can, which this is good for because it is very open to like lots of different, again, colors and textures and things like that. I try to buy a lot of the yarn and fabric that I use secondhand to minimize impacts. I know, lots of industries of art supplies have lots of effects, negative environmental effects. So definitely try to do that. And then I guess, if you buy something secondhand, each thing has a story. So perhaps in the future I'll work on really bringing those out.
That's amazing. And I've had the opportunity to see pictures of some of your weaving. They're just gorgeous. What are some of the, could you share with us some of the items that you've woven?
Yeah, I started off with just sort of like tapestries, things that are decorative. I suppose lately I've actually been more inclined towards like utilitarian weaving, I guess, is something you could say. I've made a few shirts, and right now I'm in the middle of making curtains for my house. I've made one set of curtains, but I have multiple windows. So I suppose that's sort of design based as well, and like this is something that I need and I've really enjoyed, sort of having that kind of goal to work within of, if it's a curtain and it has to be this big and block light, like what does that then end up looking like? So, yeah.
It's like sounds like a great kind of project, but it's also like doing it for yourself. And I feel like that's so important, especially like whether, like no matter what field you're working in, I feel like having a project that you're doing for yourself, but that also kind of enriches you is so valuable and fulfilling.
And at the end I'll get curtains, hopefully.
Oh my god, I would be honored if I could see pictures. Being the incredibly multifaceted designer, artist, and writer that you are, you also have a Substack called Place Cards. Could you tell us more about your writing and kind of what you write about?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I started this just at the beginning of the year, back in January. One of my friends started one for her writing, and she was like, well, you can't call yourself a writer if you don't write anything. And I sort of was like, oh God, like that I would love to call myself a writer, and that's a good point. Like that maybe is the first step, is being open to actually writing things. So I did that as a way. I'd started the blog as a way to kind of keep myself accountable. In design school, there's not a ton of writing. There's a few essays here and there. But I wanted to sort of get back to that part of my background. And and so I thought, I should just start off with writing what I know best, which I've been studying for 3 years, which is like, places and what they mean and what they can reveal about our history and things like that. So. Mm-hmm.
And then I'd also love to ask you, do you have any upcoming projects or endeavors?
This next semester I'm going to be writing my thesis for my heritage conservation program, so that is kind of the biggest thing on the horizon. It's in progress at the moment, so that I'm going to be writing about historic eucalyptus trees in Southern California, specifically in the Santa Monica Mountains, and management of them and how we can balance like historic preservation needs with ecological ones. So.
Wow, that sounds so exciting. I can imagine it's a lot of work, and I wish you the best of luck. And then I'd love to ask you, what advice would you give to people who are interested in entering this field, whether it's heritage conservation, landscape architecture, or SAORI weaving, writing, or just anything that you do? What kind of advice would you give to someone who's interested in something similar?
I think the best advice I received, which I guess I'll pass on, is just like pay attention to what excites you, and then think about how you can take that into whatever you're doing. If you love plants, maybe there's some way to include plants in your job or project or whatever. If you love talking to people, then like engaging people is probably what you should listen to, and so if you are striving to make the world a better place, you can do so through what is most exciting to you. So.
That's wonderful, and I think so important for everybody to hear, because I feel like at any stage of your life it's so important to come back to what excites you, as you said, and what drives you, because kind of as we talked about earlier, I think that's what will fuel you to bring out your best work. And it's like, I think we touched upon this a little bit earlier too, but I think they have their own purpose on this planet, and that comes from doing what they're excited about. So everyone can kind of follow that and find their purpose. And I'm speaking as if I know so much about it, but I truly believe that's true.
I mean, I'm sure it's a lifelong journey, so of being able to engage with the world around you and your purpose and finding the harmony in that. So I think, each year of my life I've learned more about it, so.
Well, Zoe, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to ask, kind of as a final question, where can listeners find and keep up with you and your work?
Great question. You can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Both are under my name. Or you can subscribe to my Substack, which is called Place Cards, and yeah, that would be where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you everyone for listening to this conversation. I will make sure to link your Instagram, your Substack, and your website and LinkedIn in the description below. And if you have any questions about this episode or the podcast, please feel free to reach me at my email, shivanigupta416@gmail.com. That's all for now, and we'll see you next time on the Landscapes of Art and Earth.